Hey everybody, today we're going to be learning about multiplying polynomials. Before you watch this video, I'd recommend that you watch our video on adding and subtracting polynomials because you must learn how to add and subtract polynomials before learning how to multiply polynomials. Now I want to start off this lesson with an example of subtracting polynomials because there is a step in subtracting polynomials that's important when multiplying polynomials. So if we scroll down, we see the example right here, 5x squared minus 9x plus 11 minus negative 2x plus 3x minus 2. Now, if you already learned how to subtract polynomials, you know that the first step in this example would be to just distribute this negative sign to every term in the second polynomial. Well, distribution is an important thing to note, not only in adding and subtracting polynomials, but also when multiplying polynomials, as you'll see later on in the lesson. Now, let's start off this lesson with an example of multiplying polynomials, an easy one to start off with. Right here we see our first example, which is x minus 4 times x plus 2. Now, these are our two polynomials, but instead of having three terms like usual, they just have two, the x minus 4 and the x plus 2. This will make it easier, but no matter how many terms there are in each polynomial, the steps or the method is the same thing. It just might take more time to rewrite and simplify. So, the first step you want to do when multiplying polynomials is just like we did in subtracting polynomials, distribution. You want to distribute the two terms in the first polynomial to the two terms in the second polynomial. And how we do this is by distributing the first term in the first polynomial, which is the x, to the first term in the second polynomial, and the second term in the second polynomial. And we also want to do the same thing with the second term in the first polynomial, the negative 4, and we distribute that also to the first term, which is x, and the second term, which is 2. May seem a little bit complicated right now, but it's pretty easy. So let's just start off with our first step. Remember how I said we want to distribute this x to both the x and 2. So we just do x times x, which is x squared. Then x times 2, which is plus 2x. And now that we distributed the first term of the first polynomial to both of these terms, we move on to the next term, which is negative 4. So now we would distribute the negative 4 to the x, which is negative 4 times x, which is minus 4x. And then we would just distribute the negative 4, which is negative 4 times 2 for this term, which is negative 8. Now that we have it simplified to this, we would just combine like terms to simplify it even more. And we would be resulted with x squared minus 2x minus 8. After multiplying these two polynomials, x minus 4 and x plus 2, this is our answer, x squared minus 2x minus 8. Now let's move on to a bit of a trickier polynomial example, multiplying polynomials. And here we see that instead of two terms in each polynomial like in the last example, we have 3. Now, it's the same method, but it might take a little bit more time. Let's just start off with the same method, which is just first taking the first term of the first polynomial and distributing it to each term in the second polynomial. So we'd start off with 4x squared times 6x squared. Now, when you're multiplying terms with x squared or just exponents, instead of multiplying the exponents each other, so your first move would probably be to do 2 times 2, you'd add exponents. When multiplying terms with exponents, you add the exponents, not multiply them. So in this example specifically, we would first multiply the coefficients, which is 6 times 4, which is 24. So we'd have 24. And now we see that the 4x, the x in this term is to the second power, where the x in the 6x squared is also to the second power. Instead of doing 2 times 2, we would add these exponents and do 2 plus 2 instead to get 24x to the 4th power. Now, let's move on from 6x squared to the next term. Now we'd have 4x squared times minus 9x, and remember, you add the exponents. Minus 9x is just the same thing as minus 9x to the first power. So you do first you would do the coefficients, which is minus 9 times 4, which is minus 36. And then you would look at the x, which is x squared, and then x to the first. So 2 plus 1 would be 3. So then in this example, you'd have x to the 3rd power. Now let's move on to the last term. 4x squared times 3 is just simple as 12x squared. Now that we distributed the first term in the first polynomial, 4x squared, let's move on to the next, which is minus 7x. We want to distribute this also to the 6x squared, to the negative 9x, and to the positive 3. So minus 7x times 6x squared, okay? Negative 7 times 6 is negative 42. And then we have an x to the first power here, and an x to the second, which is just 2 plus 1, which is x cubed. Next term, negative 7x times negative 9x, which is just positive 63x squared. And then our final for this is negative 7x times positive 3, which is just minus 21x. And finally, we would move on to our last term, the third term for the first polynomial, which is just 10. And we distribute this 10 to all three terms in this polynomial as well. 6x squared, negative 9x, and positive 3. So first we'd have 10 times 6x squared, which is just plus 60x squared. And then next we'd have 10 times negative 9x, which is just minus 90x. And then our last one would just be positive 10 times positive 3, which is just plus 30. Now notice how after multiplying these two polynomials, what we end up with is much larger than what we got here. But that's just because there's more terms. We just do the same next step as we did in the last problem, which is just combining like terms. And when combining like terms, you want to look out for the similar terms, the exponents especially. So let's start off with the highest exponent, x to the fourth power. We notice we have a 24x to the fourth here. No, there's no other term that has an x to the fourth as well. So we would just bring down that 24x to the fourth. Okay, next, our x cubed. Okay, right here we have a minus 36x cubed. And we also have a minus 42x cubed as well. So then we would subtract 42 from negative 36, which is just minus 78 x to the third power. Okay, now we move on to x squared. We have a 12x squared, a 63x squared, and a 60x squared. Now we just add 12, 63, and 60 to get, well, 12 plus 63 is 75. 75 plus 60 is 135. So then we get plus 135 x to the second, or squared. And then next we just move on to the x's, which is negative 21x and negative 90x. So we'd subtract 90 from negative 21, which is just minus 111x. And finally, we just have our term without any x, which is just the 30, so we just add 30. After combining like terms, this is what we end up with. 24x to the fourth power minus 78x cubed plus 135x squared minus 111x plus 30. It's a pretty long answer, but that's what we get when we multiply polynomials. Now, the next example, I'm going to let you guys try to do it on your own. Pause the video if you want to try it on your own, but I'm just going to explain it right now. Now, I see the numbers in this are a little bit bigger than the ones in the last one, but it's fine. We'll just do the same method and the same steps and continue along. Okay, so as in the last example, we see that we have an x squared, an x, and then a 2, or just a number without an x, in each polynomial, just like in this example. So it's basically going to be the exact same steps with the exact same methods, but it's just going to be different values. Okay, remember, let's start off with distributing each term to every term in the second polynomial. So if we start off with 7x squared, we first have 7x squared times 8x squared, which is 56x to the fourth. Then we have 7x squared times 6x, which is plus 42x cubed, or 56x to the fourth, and then plus 42x cubed. Then we would do 7x squared times 5, which is plus 35x to the second, and that's what we get when we distribute the 7x squared. Now it's time to distribute the 8x. 8x times 8x squared is just plus 64 x cubed. Then we have 8x times 6x, which is just plus 48 x squared. And then we'd have 8x times 5, which is just plus 40x. Finally, we want to distribute the 2, which would result us with 2 times 8x squared, which is 16x squared. Then 2 times 6x, which is 12x. And then finally, 2 times 5, which is 10. Now we see we have a pretty long result after multiplying these two polynomials, but like we did before, let's just combine like terms. We first see we have the 56x to the fourth. There's no other term that has an x to the fourth, so we just bring that down and start off with 56x to the fourth. Now we will go to our x cubes. We see we have a 42x cubed and a 64x cubed, so we'd add those together to get plus 106x to the x cubed. Now we move on to our x squared, where we see we have a 35x squared, a 48x squared, and a 16x squared. So now we want to add these x squares together. Okay, well, 35 plus 48 is 83, and then 83 plus 16 is just 99. So then we have plus 99x squared. Then we have our x's, which is plus 40x, and then plus 12x, which would result us with 52x. And finally, we have our 10 on the end. So this is the answer for when you multiply these two polynomials together. So if you learn how to multiply polynomials and apply the method of distribution, please consider giving the channel a sub, sharing, and thank you for watching.